Next match of the battle, Ren is going up using Kagero. Asked him to use Kagero instead of Shadow Paladin because Mythos will probably be using Shadow Paladin. He's fighting against Shadow Paladin. He does know this deck, so he should do fine. Early on, Dan has the G assist. He gets something, but now he has to remove 2 cards. He chooses grade 3 and a draw trigger. He did have 3 grade 3s in hand, but he wants to keep some for other reasons. And he does inflict a damage. Next we ride grade 2. You check this top 5 for a grade 3 and he did get one. Discards the end to draw. And now with Burnout he can put the end back to the deck and retire a unit. So that gets rid of Judge Vow before it becomes an issue later. Calamity Tower Wyvern in the rear guard. In a drive check. What I was going to say is that we haven't really put any restriction on Calamity Tower Wyvern's ability. Dan was indecisive on what to attack, whether it be the Vanguard or the rear guard. Ren makes it easy and just intercepts. If he had attacked the rear guard, then Ren would have just let it die anyway, so basically he made the decision for him. Ren rides grade 3, immediately strides and uses Calamity Tower Wyvern to give his unit a booster. He got a critical trigger. He also got to retire Blaster Dark. So now 13,000 to the Vanguard because he's not at Break Ride yet. And he doesn't want to discard his Phantom Blaster Abyss because he might not have Break Ride afterwards. Meanwhile, Ren has Legion and is using it. He doesn't get much from Stride right now other than a 3rd drive check. Meanwhile, if this is allowed to hit, then he'll get even more units. He adds the X to hand, but with no rear guards, that can only mean he has one at the end in hand as well, which means Dan has to guard. Chooses not to. Can't get a restand because Ren doesn't have that much counterblast. Even if all of his counterblast was unflipped, he only has 1 damage so far. And now Break Ride uses the counterblast to get out of Blackwing Swordbreaker, so he can get an extra draw. However, it's not a Revenger, so he's going to have to use 4 cards out of his 9-card hand just to get Revengers on the field. Technically, he only needs to use 3, but he's going to want to use 4 if he wants a behind Vanguard booster. He's trying to decide on what to use. He uses Blaster Dark, which gets him an unflip. He can't flip a damage, and he's not calling a behind Vanguard booster. And that could very well mean that Ren would have more of an ability to guard. Dan thought it was a 5k more block, but Ren did get a critical. So it was enough. Speaking of criticals, Dan just got one. Ren gets a heal trigger and at the end of the Great. And Ren has a perfect guard ready for the second attack. And now he's decided that he's going to use another stride, getting rid of the X to do so. Which is a good idea considering that he doesn't have enough to retire for that ability anyway. 2 critical triggers onto Neoflame. So he has to drop 2 10Ks just to block. Dan does have 2 more counter blasts if he can re-ride. But he also would have to commit a lot of his hand to doing a move like that. But all in all, nothing is really going to happen for Dan unless he either rides strides or does that, just starts calling units. So it's only going to be 3 basic attacks. Dan made sure to have 2 unflipped damage at the end of all this. That's a no pass, 36k. And the last one only needs 10k to block. So Ren is going for rear guards first because he obviously has to. However, because Dan let the first one hit, Neoflame retired it. Ren goes for the other rear guard and gets a trigger. The end skill can activate, allowing him to restand, and he gets another attack. Dan no guards because the critical is on the other side. And double heal by Ren. So now the match is a complete 180. To be honest, if Dan had used that, perfect guard in the beginning, he would have been in a much better situation. He probably can't end it this turn now, no matter what happens. Damage check the end, which basically just means that Ren now has 2 damage. Of course, now Dan heals. Also gets a Judge Bow, so he can call that to behind Vanguard and try it again at its skill. Couldn't do it before because it got retired too quickly. And now we have Dragonic Overlord the Great. With that unit, Ren will be able to return some of his triggers back to deck, seeing as he has gotten a lot of them out of deck up to this point. Perform a Legion that restands itself, whether it hits or not. And it looks like he was about to put back 4 heal triggers, then realized he probably needs to put a Neoflame in as well. So first attack is at a rear guard. And the second attack, of course, is at a rear guard because he needs to attack a rear guard in order to get the restand skill. Dan is letting them all be destroyed. More to say, there's not much he can do about it. And now Ren has to decide, does he want to give the critical to the Vanguard or to the rear? He gives it all to the rear because he knows that Dan kept that perfect guard from last turn. It looks like he discarded a perfect guard. No, that's a quintet wall. That's actually a smart decision. So Dan has to decide if he wants to guard, and if he will, how he'll guard. If he doesn't guard and Ren gets a critical, it's over. If he does perfect guard, then Ren can just give the critical trigger to the rear. Perfect guard. And no critical trigger. Dan was forced to give up 2 10k shields just to guard. He did not want to do that. So this is a 16k attack, but where is it going? No, he's starting with the Vanguard first. And Ren had another Quintet Wall. It took his last counterblast to use it, but he got perfect guards out of it, which means he does have defense for this. Dan doesn't get any triggers at all in response. And as a result, he goes for the rear guard so that his opponent doesn't have a counterblast, but it doesn't help. Not only that, but now Draconic Burnout's ability can retire a unit. Going for Judge Bow again. And now the Flame of Strength, this unit here, could have went into the soul to unflip 2 damage. But it's past the point of needing that skill right now, because critical trigger right there. And that's the end of the game. Ren wins. DS takes that one. And really well done on both sides. Moving on to game 2.